People were considering earlier that Brock Purdy was an MVP candidate, and obviously after last night's game, that is clearly no longer the case, as today's odds sit at now plus 1,400. But going into week 17 before this game against Lamar Jackson Ravens, he actually was in the lead for the MVP. He was the lead in the MVP race. And even going into last week and the week before when he was the lead for the MVP, I thought this was absolutely ridiculous, because even if you look at his roster in general, he is probably nowhere in the top 10 and player talent within that team. There's so much talent on the offense and the defense. And I was thinking, if there's anybody that you're going to give the MVP to on the 49ers, it would have to be that of Christian McCaffrey, who's had a ridiculous year. He's got the most running back touchdowns in the league. I think he's in the conversation for the most ever. I think he's somewhere there. If you look at what he's done, receiving the ball, if you look at just what he's done in general, his body of work for this year, he was a much better candidate to win the MVP than that of Brock Purdy. And then you just look at the weapons the guy has in general within that system. One, you have a head coach who's a guru. He's a great head coach. Just has really stood out. He's made it work with a lot of different players. And then you look at the team. Obviously, you have Christian McCaffrey, who's having this historic year. You have Deebo Samuel, who's kind of like a gadget guy, but an elevated gadget guy. He's actually a true receiver, but you can also put him as a running back if you want to. They do a lot of variations with him. Then you have George Kittle, who is like, if not a top 5 tight end, definitely a top 10 tight end. Really good tight end. When they went to the Super Bowl in 2019, him and Kelsey were neck and neck for who the best running back was, who the best tight end was in the NFL. They were neck and neck at one point. So he's a really tight. And then you have Ayuk, who has really developed well in that system and is a really solid receiver that I think a lot of people would like on their team. And, just going back to it, I really thought for a long time that Jimmy Garoppolo was a good quarterback in the NFL. I really did. I thought he was a solid quarterback piece. And then you saw him go to the Raiders, and it just all kind of fell apart. And then that just makes you realize how good of a head coach Kyle Shanahan is and how much the weapons had to factor. He really was not really that good of a quarterback. And that really comes down to Brock Purdy. He's what you call Jack. He's just a guy who can go out there and, I'm not saying that the 49ers can't win they can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. He's a game manager, but he can never, he's never going to take that elevation. He can't overcome interceptions. He's not going to, be the sole reason why a team wins a game. But yeah, you can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, but you just have to, limit, like if you look at the end of that game against the Ravens, even when they were down, he was calling play calls where it was like, we do not trust our guy. A lot of screens, a lot of short stuff. Obviously, he was cleared to play. They ended up putting Sam Darnold in, claiming that there's a shoulder injury with Brock Purdy, which most likely that might not even be that big of the case. So, I mean, you're really looking at this situation here, and another glaring thing is he was in the lead for the MVP. You saw him go up against Lamar Jackson last night in that game against the Ravens, and it was like night and day. You have one quarterback who's obviously a game manager, and then you have another quarterback who is just doing everything in his power to get this team a win. He can do everything. He can run the ball. The talent of Lamar Jackson is something that I don't think I've seen from we haven't seen from any quarterback ever. The things that he can do with the passing style, his ability to, sometimes his passing is so in rhythm that you don't even realize that his main thing is burning you on the ground. He's just a heck of a player. And you saw that, and it was kind of like you were watching a freshman quarterback and a just like elite NFL quarterback just going out there. So yeah, I just thought it was really clear that Lamar Jackson, I think, is this year's MVP hands down. But if you had to make a case for anybody, especially anybody on the 49ers, it would be Christian McCaffrey. He's had a really good year. Their odds are currently sitting, hand in hand right now. But yeah, at this point, Brock Purdy was never going to win the MVP. It would have been, I honestly do think that he would have been one of the top 10 no, he probably would have been the worst quarterback, the worst player in all of major sports to win league MVP. He just was not deserving of it when, especially Chris McCaffrey has had that good of a year, especially when Lamar Jackson has done what he's done. Remember, the Ravens have had a lot of injuries. Mark Andrews, debatably his number one weapon, is out. Two of their running backs have been out. J.K. Dobbins was lost early, and they're still putting together a really masterful season. And another thing for Lamar Jackson, 20-1 now against NFC teams. That's something to really keep an eye on. He was looking really good. I think he's the MVP. Brock Purdy, as I kept saying, just would have been a really bad MVP choice, and I'm glad that this game, that there was a game like this where he was able to get exposed and shown that he wasn't the league MVP.